Ought to. Ought to is an auxiliary verb which is quite close to the auxiliary verb must, but it has more of moral implication. Ought to expresses moral obligation or desirability as well as to express probability. So, these are three different areas where we will be using the auxiliary verb ought to. Obligation, in which there is a concern of moral, desirability, and to express probability. Let us look at the examples. We ought to love our neighbors. In this example, we are talking about a moral obligation. Since it is important for us to have good relations with our neighbors, we ought to love our neighbors. So this is showing us some kind of moral obligation. We ought to help him. Again, it is a moral duty to help others. Therefore, we can say we ought to help him. If we are using must in these two cases, let us look at it. How does it come? We must love our neighbors. There is no harm in using the word must, but it changes the meaning of the sentence in the sense that it becomes more of a rule or regulation than a moral obligation. So in order to differentiate between the moral obligation and a compulsory act, we will be using the auxiliary verb ought to. We must help him. Again, it becomes more of a strong determination or probably a rule to help others. Whereas if we are using we ought to help him, it becomes more of a moral duty, and it sounds better because we are expressing that we know about our moral obligations. Prices ought to come down soon. Now this ought to is very different from the ought to that we have used in the previous sentences. Prices ought to come down soon. This is something that we are expressing as a desirability as well as a probability. If we know the conditions of the economic state in our country and we are expecting that because of this economic state the prices will come down, we will say the prices ought to come down because there is a reason, we know about it, that because of this particular economic state, the prices will need to come down because this is the situation in the country. Also, we can use prices ought to come down soon because it is our desire that the prices should come down soon, and therefore, in order to show our desire, we are using the auxiliary verb ought to. So in this case, it will be the use of expression to show desirability or to show some probability about which we have some background knowledge. This resource material ought to be used in the classroom. Now, using ought to as the auxiliary verb in this particular sentence, it is again a kind of a desirability and also some kind of probability. Because we know this resource material is good, we have tested it, so there is a probability that this is going to be used in the classroom and it will be very helpful for the students. Because we have some background information and knowledge about it. Therefore, we are using the auxiliary verb ought to as a probability expression because we already know about it. Also, maybe we have read this material and we desire that this should be used in the classroom, and then in order to express that desirability, we say this resource material ought to be used in the classroom. It is our desire that this resource material may be used in the classroom because it is good material and there is a probability that the students will make good use of it and benefit from it. Therefore, it will be nice to use the auxiliary verb ought to because it is giving the meaning of what the intention of the speaker is. The speaker is not very sure that whether this is really a good material, but he has some information and he thinks this ought to be introduced in the classroom and it could be proving beneficial for the students.